Hello everybody and welcome to Life of Wine and Books. My name is Christina and today I'm going to talk about all the books I read and listened to over the month of July. The month of July was a great reading month for me. I read 14 books and I listened to 4 audiobooks. Sorry, I had to stop and count for a second. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of listening. Most of the books I read were young adult books, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. So throughout the course of July, over 1 week, I decided to reread a few of my old favorite books growing up. I did a few middle grade books, which I don't really read anymore, and a few young adult books. On top of that, I was just in the mood for some young adult books as well. So because of that, over half of the books I read were young adult books. And with that being said, let's start going through all the books I read. The first book I have is actually an audiobook, and that is Going Clear. Hold on, I have it written down. Going Clear, Scientology, Hollywood, and the Prison of Belief by Lawrence Wright. And this is an audiobook that talks about Scientology, its origins, the founder L. Ron Hubbard, the current leader David Miscavige, and it talks to a lot of defectors, and it talks about why is this such an appealing religion to people. What I loved about it is I love Leah Remini's show, Scientology and the Aftermath. You can find it on Netflix and Hulu. And this book had a lot of the people from that show in the book. So it was great. I learned a lot more about them. I felt like this really fleshed out and gave me a lot more information than the show, which is trying to cram a lot of information into a very short amount of time. I also learned a few interesting facts, such as Tom Cruise's performance in A Few Good Men. He bases that on David Miscavige, who is the leader of Scientology. So I feel very torn about that movie now, because I've heard it's really good, but I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that one now. I rated this book at 5 out of 5 stars, and I definitely recommend it if you're into cults, extreme beliefs, anything like that. This is a book that you should definitely check out. My next book is Mirage by Somaiya, Daud. And this is a young adult book. It's the first in a duology, and it follows a young girl named Imani. And on the day of her coming-of-age ceremony, it's a sci-fi book, she's abducted and taken to the royal palace because she's a dead ringer for the crown princess, who is not very liked by the people, the empire, because her people, basically, the crown princess, whose name is, I can't remember, Morrow, they destroyed their home planet, so they came to Imani's area, part of space, and they took over, and they are obviously not very well liked. And so Imani now has to be a body double for Morrow. And the whole time she's trying to navigate court life, and it's sci-fi, but it's also Afrofuturist, because it's based off of North African culture, a lot of Arabic things incorporated. I loved it. I thought it was great. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I have pre-ordered the next one. It's out in hardback, but I wanted paperback because the paperback cover matches this cover in terms of style, and I'm weird like that. So the paperback comes out later in August, and I'm super excited to get my hands on it. The next book I read is Nothing to Envy by Garber, Demick, and I went to town tabbing this book up. This is about 6 different individuals, 5 or 6 individuals from North Korea who have all defected or left. And it's them talking about their life, their experiences growing up in North Korea. I found this book absolutely fascinating. I've had it on my shelf forever, and I'm really upset with myself that I've just now read it. I learned so much, as you can tell. I want to transfer all these tabs to my Read More app, but I figured, because I would read and then I would stop to type something interesting I learned onto the app on my phone, and it just slowed everything down. So I got tabs, I did that. I'm going to eventually transfer it over, but that's going to be a huge project. I highly recommend this book if you're interested in North Korea. The one thing I didn't like is it jumped around a lot, but I still gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I've seen this book all over, I've seen this author all over, and I'm really glad I picked up this book. This follows, it's a family legacy type of story, and it follows 2 half-sisters, Effie and Essie. And in Ghana in the 1700s, one is enslaved and brought against her will to the United States. One stays in Africa and marries up in society to a British soldier. and it's basically one chapter for each descendant. So you have one chapter for Essie, one chapter for Effie, and then you just move down the generations and you watch these two different stories unfold in completely different ways while going through events such as the decolonization of Ghana, the civil rights movement, and the Harlem Renaissance. I really enjoyed it. I thought the style was very unique, one chapter per character. It did leave me wanting more from each character, and that's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm sorry, Willow wants to go out. She's been out twice already this morning, and she hasn't done anything except run around and cause problems. But I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend this book. So the next book I read is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. And this follows 2 sisters, Scarlett and Donatella, and they live under their dad is super protective of them, and they want to go to this mysterious Caraval that appears like once a year, and it's supposed to be like magical and where all your dreams come true. It's like a traveling circus type of thing. And so they end up getting to go one year, but things take a turn for the worst when Donatella is abducted, and Scarlett, the whole game revolves, this year at Caraval, revolves around Scarlett trying to find her sister. And I loved it. It was so atmospheric. The way everything was described was gorgeous. I gave it a 3.5 stars because, sorry, Willow's here causing all sorts of problems. Say hello. Because like at times I was like, okay, I don't really care about what's happening, but I loved how everything was described. It's the first in a trilogy, and I think I'm going to definitely check out the trilogy. I also felt like, I'm going to backtrack for a second, because I have notes in my journal. I felt like the characters were very superficial at times, and that just kind of drew everything away from me. But, like I said, I loved how everything was described, and I'm going to try out, I did the audiobook, I'm going to try out the audiobook for the second one, and then kind of figure out where I want to go from there in terms of finishing the series or not. This video just does not want to get filmed. I've had to get up to let Willow out. I got up to bring her up to my fiance. It is so warm in here. It's a mess. It is a mess, but we're going to power forward so you understand like why my hair is changing, why the angle is changing, anything like that. I'm going to blame Willow. The next book starts the week of rereads that I did of old favorites, and I started with Anne Frank and Me by Cherie Bennett and Jeff Gottesfeld. And I got this years and years and years ago at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum here in Washington, D.C. And I read it, I bought it on a whim on like a 7th grade field trip, and I've read it multiple times ever since. It's about a girl named Nicole and her school, her middle school, I think it's middle school, or high school. They're going on a class field trip to see the Anne Frank exhibit. It's kind of ambiguous where in the country this is taking place. And while their shots ring out, Nicole in the melee falls, hits her head, and wakes up in Nazi-occupied Paris as a young Jewish girl. And she is trying to navigate all of that. She's slowly losing her memories about what happened, and it's beautiful. It is really well written. I felt like there could have been more. Like reading it now, it stands up, but the end, I mean, you know how some books you're like, okay, you know, you went on for 50 too many pages. This could have gone on for like 50, 60, 75 more pages and been totally fine and would not have lost anything. I think it would have added to the story. So that was my one complaint about this book, was that there was more that could have been told and more that could have been done. This is also a play. It started as a play, then was turned into a novel, which is pretty cool as well. I keep meaning to look and see if I can find clips of that play on YouTube, but I haven't looked yet. The play is called Anne Frank and Me, if anybody is curious. So I gave this book, I gave it four stars. Sorry, I have my notes right here. I gave this book 4 stars. Next, I read a middle grade book, and that is The Dollhouse Murders by Betty Wright. And this is about a girl named Amy, and she has a younger sister named Luann who is mentally disabled. And I feel like they hammed up and kind of really, it was not a very good portrayal of mental disability. And Amy's always in charge of taking care of her sister Luann, which is obviously very frustrating for a 12-year-old who just wants to, you know, have her own life, and her parents like, but you have to take care of Luann, but poor little Luann. And so it becomes very frustrating for Amy. So she goes to stay with her aunt, who is cleaning out her Aunt Claire. Claire is cleaning out her childhood home. Aunt Claire and Amy's dad were raised by their grandparents until they were brutally murdered. And so, while helping her aunt clean out the house, Amy finds this really beautiful antique dollhouse in the attic, and strange things start to happen. The dolls start to move on their own, lights are seen coming from the dollhouse, and weird noises, all of that, and it's all connected back to the murder of Amy's great-grandparents. This book is creepy, it's scary, it's adorable. I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Like I said, the only thing I found really problematic was the portrayal of Luann. It is a movie too. You can find it on YouTube. I can't remember what it's called, but it's not called the Dollhouse Murders, but you can definitely find it on YouTube. It was like made in the early 90s as like a straight to VHS type of deal, but I've been meaning to watch it. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed this book. This book, like I said, besides Luann, has definitely stood up to the test of time. My next book is a ghost classic. I loved ghost books when I was young, so you're going to notice a pattern here. And that is Wait Till Helen Comes by Mary Downing Hahn. And this is about another middle grade book, and it's about a girl named Molly, and her mom has just gotten remarried, and she and her new blended family, they moved from Baltimore to, they say, the mountains in Maryland. I live in Maryland, so I'm going to guess the Panhandle. And it's Molly, Michael's the brother, the mom, Heather, who's the stepsister, and the stepdad. And Heather's 7, and oh my god, she's just written in the most horrific, bratty, oh my gosh. Like, my niece is going to be 7 at the end of the month, and she doesn't act, like, I've never seen a 7-year-old act like this. Like, sucking her thumb, manipulating the dad, and the dad's like, my precious baby could never do anything wrong, and all of that. And Heather, they're trying to make Heather feel welcome, and they're like, but her mom died in a fire, and she was a witness to her mom's death, and we have to baby her forever. But you're just signing yourself up for, and like, the dad won't get her therapy, anything like that. You're just signing yourself up for problems down the line. But Heather starts having this mysterious friend named Helen, who turns out to be the ghost of a little girl who lives on the property, who is quite lonely, and wants Heather to join her forever and keep her company. The book is scary, it is creepy, it's just as scary as I remember. This one has also been turned into a movie, and I think it premiered at Sundance, that sounds about right, and you can find it on Amazon Prime, and it looks creepy. It's a new movie, came out in the past 5 years, and I am dying to watch it, I just haven't yet, but this book definitely stands up 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, enough of the ghost books. We have a thriller book next, and that is Locked in Time by Lois Duncan, the author of the famous books I Know What You Did Last Summer and Killing Mr. Griffin. This is about a girl named Noor, and her dad has just gotten remarried. There's a lot of stepfamilies in these. Her dad has just gotten remarried. Her dad's a widower, and Noor is coming back. She goes to boarding school to spend the summer with her new family down south, and at this beautiful plantation, which is problematic in its own right. And Noor starts to notice something's not quite right with her stepfamily, and she's determined to get to the bottom of these secrets. And I liked it. I think my big complaint was it was just all of a sudden she's like, bingo, something's not right. Oh, look, I figured it out. It seemed to come out of nowhere, and that's what bothered me a lot. I've noticed that young adult books from when I was a young adult are more superficial than young adult books now, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, there was no build up to anything. She just happens upon this information and then magically puts all the pieces together in the blink of an eye, and that really bothered me a lot. I did like the thriller aspect of it, though. I did think the plot, the twist was worthwhile if you don't know that it's coming. I did give this 4 stars, but I think I'd bump it down to like 3.75 just because it just seemed to all fall into place a little too easily. I forgot to mention with Locked in Time, Lois Duncan has actually gone through and updated all of her books. They originally took place in the 80s, so she updated them to include things like laptops, cell phones, iPods, and so this is an updated version, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. I kind of wish that she hadn't done that and just let the books stand on their own, kind of be timeless, and not have this modern aspect. You wrote the books in the 80s, there's nothing wrong with that. Let them take place then. The next book is one of my absolute faves. I really don't know how many times I've read this book. Oh my gosh, probably 10. Yeah, it's that bad. And that is Mandy by Julie Edwards, also known as the famous actress Julie Andrews. She wrote this book, and she wrote another one called The Last of the Really Great Rain Doodles, which it never called to me. This book I've read, this is probably like my 4th or 5th copy of this book that I've owned, because I keep loaning it to people and losing it. This is about a little girl named Mandy who is an orphan, and she just really wants somewhere to belong. She wants something of her own, and one day she climbs the orphanage wall and comes across this little tiny cottage in the woods, and she creates this project. She fixes it up, she gardens, she cleans it up, and this is really her space to be her own. And she starts then lying a little bit, you know, little white lies, sneaking around, doing all of that to keep this cottage a secret, because she knows if she tells people, then she won't be able to go back. And all of this comes to a head one day when she's stuck at the cabin during a really bad storm, and her secret comes out, and just everything changes. It's adorable and heartwarming, and you know that feeling you get when you read The Heart and Cerulean Sea? It's like that. It is a middle grade book, but you have that fluffiness that I can't even describe it. It also has these gorgeous pen illustrations in here that I don't read a lot of books with illustrations, so those are just a nice little touch. This book is just as precious as I remember it. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. So those are all of the rereads I did, and I did do a reading vlog for that. I'll try to remember to link that down below so that you can see that reading vlog and see my thoughts as I go through these books. I also have a lot going on that week. I think I also did a boss battle. Yes, I did a boss battle for my Avengers Readathon, so there was a lot going on in that video, but I will try to remember to link it down below for you guys. My next book is my absolute favorite book I read this month. It was phenomenal, amazing, oh my gosh, and that book is The One by John Mars. And this is also a TV show on Netflix. It's about, it takes place in the modern world where you can take this DNA test and you will be matched to your one true love, like your soulmate. And it goes through 5 different couples and 5 different people and what happens to them. And what I really loved about it was it dealt with a lot of like what ifs, because I'm like, well, what if this would happen? Well, guess what? It's dealt with in this book. Does it handle every what if situation? No. Does it handle a lot of them? Yes. And I loved that so much. The plot twists, oh my gosh, there are so many times I'm just screaming and yelling. My fiance is laughing hysterically because I'm just yelling into this book. I'm literally like pages open, burying my face into it, screaming my head off because I can't handle what I just read. I'm excited to watch the show, but I'm also afraid that it's not going to live up to this book. It was phenomenal. It was a super quick read. Highly, highly recommend it. Without a doubt, 5 out of 5 stars. My favorite book that I've read this month. Now that we've talked about my favorite book that I read in the month, we're going to talk about my least favorite book. That is A Song Below Water by Brittany C. Morrow. And I hated this book so much. I had no idea what was going on. It is about this society where you have sirens, and they're treated like second-class citizens. So Tavia, the main character, must keep her identity as a siren a secret. And then you have her friend Effie, who something weird is going on with Effie, and they don't really know what. Could she be a siren? Could she be something else? They're not entirely sure. I felt like it had a lot of potential. It kind of alluded to similarities between the treatment of sirens and the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter movement, but I felt like it just fell flat. There's this one point where Effie has this life-shattering realization, and then she's like, OMG, I have to go to prom. What? Your world literally just turned on its head, and then you're like, oh, but prom. I have to go to prom. I hated it. I hated it. I gave it a 2 stars, and the only reason I gave it 2 stars was because it alluded to the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement, but had it not done that, it would have been a 1 star. Had it done more of that, it probably would have been a 3 star. I still had no idea what was happening half the time. This is a book that I am definitely going to be unhauling very, very soon. Next, we have an audio book that I thought was fantastic, and that is And the Answer Is by Alex Trebek. And this is, he doesn't really describe it as a memoir. It's just him reflecting on events over the course of his life. in very, very short chapters. It's read by him and Ken Jennings, and I liked that it was like a conversation. So Ken would be reading, then Alex Trebek would cut in and go, sorry to interrupt you, Ken, but I think I'm going to take over for a little while. And Ken would be like, no problem, Alex, you go ahead. And so the audiobook is 10,000% the way to go. I learned so much information. I found it absolutely fascinating. I loved it. I seriously loved it. Even if you've watched Jeopardy just once or twice, you definitely need to read this. The audiobook's only like 5 or 6 hours at most, so it's not that very long. I would definitely read this book. My next book is We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Tehlor K. Mejia, and this is the second book. It's in a duology. The first one is called We Set the Dark on Fire. Sorry, my mind just went totally blank for a moment. And this is a follow-up, so I don't want to get a lot into it. I will tell you that it took a long time for me to get into this book. Had I read it straight from We Set the Dark on Fire, because it picks up literally moments after that one ends, I would have liked it a lot more. But towards the end, I found myself not able to put it down. It just took a long time for me to get to that moment. And for that reason, I'm giving this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, we have another audiobook, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. And this is about a psychotherapist who goes to this mental institution for prisoners, and he is charged with trying to get this one woman who killed her husband. She was found all covered in his blood, and she hasn't spoken a word since then. She's been found guilty of his murder, and he is charged with getting her to talk and figuring what happened that caused her to murder him. And I thought it was phenomenal. At first I was like, I don't understand how this connects to this, because you're getting like all of this information that just seemed irrelevant. But then the plot twist, I was driving home and I was screaming and I couldn't, it was just mind-blowing how it all came together. Definitely recommend it. 4.5 out of 5 stars. We are almost done. We have 2 books left, and the second to last book is Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. This is the second book in the arc of the Scythe. So this is a society where people don't die. Natural deaths, they're rendered deadish and can be brought back to life, like 99% of the time. And you have these scythes, and their job is to go and glean people or kill them to keep the population control down. And so this is the second book. I don't want to get a lot into it. This was another one that took me a little while to get into, but once I got into it, I could not put it down. The end was ridiculous and just crazy, and it's like watching this car accident you know is going to happen, and from a distance, and you're just kind of like slow motion screaming like, no, and you want to stop it, but you can't. And I've heard The Toll, which is the last book in the trilogy, is kind of meh, but I'm still excited to check it out. The first 2 are phenomenal. I would definitely read them. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. My last book is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, and this is a book about Ariadne, who is the princess who gave Theseus the ball of string so he could kill the Minotaur, get out of the labyrinth, lead all the Athenian youth to safety, and this is her story. And I really thought, I didn't know a lot about Ariadne besides that, so I really thought that this book was going to focus on that aspect of her story, but there's so much more to it. And then it also talks about her sister Phaedra and her story. I loved the portrayal of Ariadne and Phaedra. I loved just Theseus, how he was portrayed, really created a more human character instead of this hero. It is an incredibly slow burn, though. That is my one big complaint. It is like a super slow burn, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because it just seemed to drag. I mean, it isn't very long, but it just kept meandering at the snail's pace. But I learned a lot. I thought it was fascinating. The ending was beautiful. If you liked Song of Achilles and you liked Circe, this is a book that I would definitely recommend. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So there you have it, guys. Those are all of the books I read over July, either audio books or physical books. I did a ton of reading. I'm really proud of myself, and I'm hoping that I can keep up this pace in August because I have 10 million readathons that I'm doing, and I have everything kind of planned out, and I just got to barrel through it and get as much done as humanly possible. If you like the content that you saw, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you get alerts when I upload more videos. leave a comment below telling me your favorite book that you read this month. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again soon.